Between science and ignorance, there is filler.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Paranormal Filler. I am your host, Wes Forsyth, and yes, this is my new time slot, if you're listening live. We've moved the show to 9 p.m. Sunday nights for the live listeners. This allowed us to clear up some hectic stuff that goes on at the beginning of the show when I'm trying to launch a bunch of live feeds. And if I'm a minute late, everything just goes to hell. This way, hey, if I wanted to right now, I could kill the whole thing and start over. That's the beauty of internet radio. My guest tonight is Reverend John Marcus Polk. He is the author of Yahweh, the Biblical God is an Alien. I want to remind everybody that Paranormal Filler is brought to you by Ken Boggles, House of Cards, Tarot by Ken.com. Now don't forget you can still catch Paranormal Filler at its usual time slots on all of the finer internet radio networks, including Live Paranormal, Dark Matter, AM/FM 24/7, and Diversity Broadcasting. Don't stop listening at your favorite location just because we dicked around with the show timing and format. And this is so much less stressful on me. I have like 2 buttons to push now. I still screw them up half the time, but this way I've just got a couple of buttons to push. So, if I'm a minute or 2 late, screw it. Now, another thing, last night, those of you who follow me on Twitter got to partake in my night out on the town. Just a little thing. I actually did a couple of periscopes. I did live tweeting all night. My Twitter feed is worth watching. If you can get through the advertising and the spam, we had a great time last night. Me and a good little contingent of Twitter followers, although none of them were obviously in the Frankfort, Kentucky area because I actually had Scarefest tickets to give away and could not get anybody to claim them because I wasn't going to give them to somebody who was already there. That would sound dishonest. I wanted somebody new to show up and nobody did. But we'll work on that. So follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, and come see me July 24th at Bobby Mackey's Music World, where I will be with Brian Cano and The Method. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Wes.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Now, this is going to be a weird interview for me because, in full disclosure, I did not get time to actually read the book that you most graciously sent me an electronic copy of. I did go through the Cliff Note version, you might say, because it's really got a really good outline at the beginning of it. And so I went through some stuff, so what I've gathered of it, here's my dilemma. Some parts you make perfect sense. Some parts my Judeo-Christian upbringing is going to get in the way. And then other times I have to kick in and play the skeptic just to keep the listeners happy. So whatever the question sounds like, just try to roll with it and go on.
Sure. Absolutely.
Now, let's go back. You're a psychic medium, but you came into it a little different direction than the typical medium that I talk to. So tell everybody about when you were young and how you kind of fell into this knowledge that you've gained.
Okay, it all started when I was about 5 years old. My mom introduced me to the Ouija board, which I'm not a proponent of the Ouija board. I don't like Ouija boards. I don't use them. But, Mom did it and got me into it. And what the Ouija board does is it serves as a vortex. And my mom was a medium, still is a medium. And when you put a medium next to a vortex, the vortex expands. And so I think I got pulled into it also. So I remember I'm 5 years old and doing the Ouija board with my mom. And, are you moving it? No. Are you moving it? No. Are you moving it? My mom's like, honey, if you're moving it, you must tell me the truth that you're. I'm like, Mom, I'm not moving the Ouija board at all. I think that was my introduction to the spirit world. And then when I was about 13, I started to see ghosts, which I still do to this day. Started seeing them in the mirror, started seeing them in my room, especially in my room late at night. And then when I was 15, we moved to $1 million condo on the ocean in Daytona Beach. And that was my first abduction by extraterrestrials that I can honestly remember. I can remember we had this incredible condo on the ocean, and I could just sit up in my bed and see the waves, which was just beautiful and ethereal. And, my lullaby every night was the crashing waves on the beach shore. And it's not unusual to look out over the ocean and see an undulating light, which was often the moon. But this particular night, it was not the moon. It was a low light. It was obviously not the moon. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a meteorite. And then the next thing I know, I see 3 gray aliens looking through my sliding glass door. And they kind of press their heads up against the glass, looking at me almost as if they were children in a zoo looking at an animal. And then the next thing I know, they were in my bedroom. And then, poof, I blacked out. And I woke up the next day, and I was experiencing pain in my private areas, if you will. And a couple days later, the pain went away, and I just wrote it off as a dream. And then when I was 39, back in 2009, I started to do what I call pop my alien memory cap, where I started to see visions of what was happening to me when I was younger, when I was being abducted. I started seeing flashes, kind of like quick movie clips, and then eventually it turned into like a 3 to 5 minute movie montage trailer. And it all started to come together. I started seeing UFOs at an incredible clip, especially after I became an ordained minister and a Reiki Master. And it just kept ramping up to this day. And it's not unusual for low-flying drones and unmarked aircraft to be flying around my house when these things happen. So I had a lifetime of experiences, and it just seems to become more and more frequent as I get older. Now,
my understanding is of the way you came to, we'll call it the knowledge that you put into the book. The aliens themselves didn't slide you any great secrets, or at least not that I caught. But you actually went at it a little different clip. You used your psychic abilities, your connection with spirit in a generic sense, to basically wade the jury or whatever, and find out the answers that way. Is that correct?
I did. I started receiving what I would call downloads. So first, the first one that really came to me in my late 30s, I mean, they've been coming to me my whole life, but I wasn't really able to attach names to any of them until I was about 39 years old. I was dating a girl, and she and I were both very spiritual people, and it was cold in Florida. 40s in Florida is cold. And something told me to go outside around midnight, which is very strange. So I go outside, and I'm kind of just standing outside thinking, why am I even out here? And then something literally pulled my head to look straight up, and I see a triangular formation of stars, curiously low in the night sky. And one of them started to move. It was the bottom left-hand corner of the triangle. If you could picture the apex of a pyramid at the top, it was shaped like that kind of triangle, not a right triangle. And then the bottom left corner moved basically straight to the left, and then it would snap back in place. And so I texted my girlfriend at the time, and she and her sister and her sister's boyfriend were outside watching the same thing at the same time. And then that's when the downloads really started to begin after that. There some kind of visitation happened, something to pull me outside in the winter. And like I said, 40s is not that cold, but in Florida it is. To pull me outside, to pull my head to look directly above and to see that triangular star formation. Then I started to receive information from an archangel. I like to call them the archaliens because they all presented themselves in physical form in the biblical texts. But this one was Enoch. It was only mentioned once in the Old Testament, but here's what it basically said about Enoch, is that God descended from the skies in a fiery chariot and took Enoch up to the heavens. So what does that mean? My God does not require a vehicle to travel from point A to point B. Also, a fiery chariot, that implies it was some kind of rocket ship. And so that started my wheels turning about, what is this all about? I was raised in church, Presbyterian, and then Baptist, and I started to challenge my own self and my own belief systems and really start to question. And then I started watching Ancient Aliens, and I became a huge fan of Eric von Daniken, Giorgio Tsoukalos, and Zecharia Sitchin, all their work and their philosophies and their books, and not to mention the TV show Ancient Aliens. And I must have watched that show for probably 3 or 4 years before it started to click. And something that Eric von Daniken says in his book Chariots of the Gods, which was released in 1968, a year before I was born, but he says the story is all the same. If you go back in history and you look at every culture around the world, they all have a similar story with different heroes, different deities, different names, but it's basically the same story, that the gods, plural, descended from the sky and created mankind in their image. And it took a number of years, like I said, and I slowly started to believe in ancient alien theory, that I guess that the planet was seeded. And it's a very, very, very old concept, but it's still very new to a lot of people, especially people, that have been raised in church like most of us.
Now, it's a strange thing for me because, like I said, much of what you say, I have a very, I hate to use the word liberal interpretation of the Bible, but I never felt, of course, you go in a little different direction, but I always did some things you alluded to in your notes. I always had trouble justifying a lot of the for lack of a better word, hell and brimstone God of the Old Testament versus the loving God of the New Testament.
Yeah, me too.
And so, but my thesis was always that man is the one that screwed it up. That God tried to give us messages, and then in the end, the whole he said, she said, and you tell so-and-so, and then you finally somebody writes it down. So that was always the direction I went. But I find it interesting in yours. First, let's go with Yahweh, the Jewish God, the God of the Bible. Your thesis is that he is just another one of these alien gods, correct?
I wouldn't say just another one.
Okay.
Basically, who he is, he's actually Enlil of the Anunnaki. I don't know if you've ever read the Epic of Gilgamesh, or if you're familiar with the whole the whole story behind the Anunnaki. But that also, goes back to Mesopotamia, Sumeria, ancient Babylon, Akkad, and Assyria, which is now current-day Iraq. But their mythology is basically the same as our mythology. The gods descended from the heaven and created mankind. But yeah, Yahweh, in effect, is Enlil of the Anunnaki, and Enlil is basically God, who is portrayed in the Bible and in the Hebrew Bible, and especially Old Testament God. Old Testament God, he killed people. He flooded the earth, killed everybody. He killed innocent women and children. Exodus 11, God killed the firstborn Egyptian sons because the Egyptians wouldn't let the Hebrews go. My God doesn't kill people. He actually killed Ramses' baby son. It's like a few months old. My God does not kill people. I am an ordained minister, but what I am is I'm an International Metaphysical Minister. So I'm a non-denominational, non-secular ordained minister, And metaphysics is recognized as a religion, at least by way of the University of Sedona, because it's all based on God. It's all based on God. It's all based on love, your God self, your God mind, your God power, and affirmations, the power of positive thinking. It's all based on what they term in the literature as the universal God consciousness. So the most important thing in my life by far is the universal God consciousness. So therefore, there is monotheism. There is only one God. And we are all a part of this one God. The most important race on this planet is the human race, and we're all a part of it. Religion divides us, or at least what we think religion is. Religion causes us to fight. Religion causes wars, or at least what we think religion is. And it divides us. It separates us. It's one of the biggest problems we have on our planet. And when we can all realize that we all come from the same source, we all come from the same maker, and that is the universal God consciousness. And that's what my whole belief system is based on now.
But see, now this is where I have trouble with it, and this is a good trouble, don't get me wrong. I believe in the God consciousness, if you will, the universal God. My thesis was always that we just really screwed up the interpretation of what this God, was, how we interact with him, what he wanted, to a great degree. Yahweh. Now I'm assuming that you still attribute the God consciousness, I don't want to say as a being, but as something. Is tangible the right word? In other words, there is an intelligence to this God concept, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Does he have a physical container or a body? No. He's more like a infinite, universal spirit being that permeates the entire universe.
Okay, so it fits the typical definition of God.
Yeah, I mean, God is infinite.
Yes, okay.
God is infinite. God is omnipotent. And he lends to us for this lifetime what you could call your God self or your soul. Mm-hmm. And so, therefore, we all have a God self or a soul within us, which is the part of God that he lends to us for this particular lifetime. And that's the common thread that really should be binding us all together. But we don't believe that. We believe that we have separate gods, and it divides us. And it creates wars, creates problems. I mean, and it's happening every day. If we could all, learn to love each other and realize we all come from the same source, there's another word, from the same source, I think the world would be a better place to live.
Now, in some of the notes, you said that when we die, the normal process would be that we would go to whatever God that we worship, we would go to their heaven. And then when we're done there, then we get to go to God with the big capital G. So are you saying that this is would we still consider this a symbiotic relationship, the God of the Bible versus the God?
Well, Yahweh, or Enlil of the Anunnaki, fashioned his own version of heaven and his own version of hell. So basically, if you celebrate Christmas, or at least are a quasi-Christian, when you die, your soul is really not going to go to heaven. It's going to go to this alien creator God's version of heaven. And it consists of a light. You die, you see the light, you end up going to this version of heaven. And it's very interesting. I have a show on Friday nights, and we were talking to an archaeologist named Jeffrey Boyd, and we were talking about how almost every ancient culture in their caves and in their temples have star maps, literally star maps, to show their soul where to go in the afterlife. And what that actually means is they're going to this version of this creator God alien's heaven or that version of that creator God's hell. It depends on how they live their life. And this is in all cultures, but it's not in ours. It's funny. More people have worshipped crocodiles. More people have worshipped the stars than they have Jesus Christ in human history. And people don't know or understand that. But, Christ was here 2,000 something years ago. But how about all of the thousands and thousands of years before Christ was even born? Who did they worship? According to Christianity, if you don't worship God and give your soul to Jesus Christ, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. And I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying the fact that I'm going to go to hell for premarital sex. I'm not buying the fact that women are to be subservient to the man. I don't believe that either. Most religions are very, very selfish towards women, give them no rights at all. The woman is not even supposed to really even speak unless spoken to. And, women are only really supposed to have sex for procreation instead of recreation. And I'm just not buying any of that at all. Not buying it. I think it's more of a control mechanism than it is really a religion.
Well, see, now that right there, see, I agree with you right there. Without even getting into the nitty-gritty of the theology. Let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. My guest tonight is Reverend John Marcus Polk. You're listening to Paranormal Filler.
Learn the method at Bobby Mackey's with Brian J. Cano. Sunday, July 24th. Learn investigating techniques, participate in experiments, and come experience Bobby Mackey's firsthand. Join Brian as he explores the infamous Bobby Mackey's music world for the first time. His method tour focuses on the process, philosophy, and execution of paranormal investigating and is suitable for novices and veterans alike. Brian's goal is to take each attendee and alter their perspectives with critical thinking, basic techniques, and logic. Event highlights will be broadcast live by me, Wes Forsyth of Paranormal Filler. Be interviewed about your experiences as they happen. For more information, go to neverstopsearching.com. That's The Method with Brian J. Cano, Sunday, July 24th.
And welcome back to Paranormal Filler. My guest is Reverend John Marcus Polk. Where I was going with that last question, John, the God, is this something that he merely allows? Is this something he enables? Making a whole another step just to get to heaven seems cosmically inefficient, I guess, is the term I would use.
And so what exactly is the question? I'm sorry.
I'm trying to hash out the relationship that Yahweh or any of the other gods would have with the universal God.
Oh, okay, all right. So, So get this: where we pray to Yahweh or Enlil of the Anunnaki, he receives our prayer energy. Mm-hmm. And imagine, there's over 1 billion Christians on this planet. Imagine how much prayer energy you receive.
Not as much as you'd think, but go ahead.
Yes, but so we pray to God, and he receives our prayer energy. Yes. And then when we die, he inherits our souls also in the afterlife. And we can get caught up in that quantum hologram matrix where we get reincarnated a number of times before we even actually go to the God light, to the universal God consciousness. Universal God consciousness knows that these creator God aliens are doing this. And the creator God aliens, guess who they worship? They worship the universal God consciousness. And they don't want us to, because they want to get the power from our prayer energy and our souls. So where this was making Yahweh exponentially more powerful supernaturally within his own soul hierarchy within himself, it's now making him weak. And the reason why is because the higher gods rule the heavens, and the lower gods rule the planets and the underworld. And Yahweh wants to ascend to the ranks of the higher gods and be counted amongst the higher gods and basically be the boss of the lesser gods that rule the planets and the underworld. And the only way that he can do that is by disclosure. When disclosure ultimately happens, I'm hoping that it happens within the next handful of years. I know it will happen before I die. I'll be 47 next month. It will happen before I die. And when it does happen, the world will know that religion was created by extraterrestrials. And that's a huge thing. And I think it's very, very necessary for all of us to understand it. Even the Vatican came out in 2008 and said that the belief in extraterrestrials does not conflict with a belief in God. And I agree with that completely. You know, there's God, and then there's extraterrestrials that pose as God. And this is common throughout all cultures around the world.
Now, shifting off that just a little bit. Okay, now being in the metaphysical realm, I work with psychics, I work with ghosts, and
me too.
It's well, but it's very. I've always said that, of course, where a lot of the Christian theology is that psychics and mediums are evil, et cetera, et cetera. But the people that I've met in the metaphysical realm, if you will, are some of the most spiritual people. Now, they may not worship and it's kind of what you're saying, the God of the Bible. And I was just sitting here thinking about when I do actually pray, I guess you could say because I don't envelop myself in the Bible, that I feel like I pray to, my prayers are aimed at the highest source available. Now, where does someone like me and the other people that are in that spiritual realm, where do we fall? Is our upbringing still going to lock us into dealing with Yahweh, or do we have that ability inherently to bypass that and connect with what we like to call spirit in the field?
Brilliant question and astute observation. Let me tell you a little story. So last year, a number of people, it's a family, they all died. And so I flew out to, I don't want to use any names, but I flew to wherever I flew to attend the wake and then the funeral. And this guy, very close to me, and then his parents had passed before him. So his parents were on the other side, waiting to escort him away from Yahweh's version of heaven. And so imagine this: I'm at the wake, and there's like 350, 400 people at this wake, and I decide I want to get away from all these people because I'm hearing everybody's thoughts in my head. I'm trying to get a clear channel, and I just can't do it. There's too many people. So I go and sit at one of the pews, and I look at this individual. I wanted to be able to see his face in the casket. And then all of a sudden I see his soul up above his body looking down. And he was actually just overwhelmed with happiness because of how many people paid respects to him and his family. He was a respected leader in the church. He was a respected icon in the business community. And he was loved and revered by anybody that knew him. And so I'm sitting there, and now I can see his soul over the casket. And he's saying to me, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you something. And I'm trying to listen, and I just can't get a clear channel. I said, tell me when I'm away from all these people. So I go to my hotel room. The next morning, wake up, and the first thing that I hear is, it's him. And he's saying, I feel so stupid. And I'm like, why? And he said, I'd been praying to aliens my whole life, and I didn't even know it. And I said, well, it's all about intention. Everybody conveniently forgets about the fire and brimstone, send you to hell if you do anything that I tell you not to do. The Old Testament God, everybody conveniently forgets about that and focuses on the New Testament, which I understand why. And I tell them it's all about intention. The God that you loved was a loving God, and that was your whole life. You based your whole life on God. You're in church at least twice a week, Sunday and then on Wednesday, and all the little workshops that they do, and Sunday school, a deacon in the church. Sunday school teacher. I mean, his whole life was about God and love. And I said, because that's what you believe, then that's what you're going to get out of God on the other side. And then he told me that his parents were on the other side, and they both had passed before him, to escort him away from Yahweh's version of heaven so he didn't get stuck in that soul recycling program that Yahweh had created. If you pray to God your whole life and you believe that the Bible is your doctrine, that it is truth, you're going to get stuck in that soul recycling program, just like most Christians that are devout do. Now, you were talking about psychics. Most psychics that I know are some of the most beautiful, loving healers also, most of them are, that I know. People that you would ever meet, and they often use the term source. And source is basically what I've been talking about, the universal God consciousness. Now, individuals like that are going to bypass Yahweh's version of heaven or Yahweh's version of hell because they're enlightened. They're enlightened and they're not being programmed and controlled by religion.
Another quick commercial. You're listening to Paranormal Filler. We'll be right back with more from John Marcus Polk.
Hello, friends. Are you exhausted with life? Resent your children? Maybe your husband is cheating on you. Get yourself a tarot reading with Ken Boggle. He can provide you with the clarity, guidance, and answers you need. That's tarotbyken.com. He makes things seem less shitty.
And everybody loves that commercial, John. The first one I did for him was so serious and sincere, and I was so proud of myself. And then he comes back and has me do that one. Anyway.
That was hilarious, Wes. That was the best laugh I had all day.
Well, then let's end this show now because I'm not going to top that. Okay, now here's my bone of contention with you. Now, believe it or not, it's not about the religious part. You call reincarnation soul recycling. Now, in the realm of psychics that I deal with mostly, and I believe in reincarnation. Now, my thing about it was always that it's not a bad thing. That is just us being given chances, being given certain situations, being given destinies that we can avoid to improve ourselves until we either reach a level where we're worthy of heaven or we've screwed it up so bad we're worthy of hell. So that's, I guess that is kind of me bastardizing my Judeo-Christian upbringing with what I've encountered in the paranormal world. But in your thesis, the reincarnation is not a good thing. It's just Yahweh keeping his thumb on us, correct?
Not necessarily. Reincarnation, like this individual I talked about who passed on, he'll eventually be reincarnated also. He's just not going to, be sidetracked and go through this false version of heaven before he goes to the godlight. Reincarnation is necessary for us to get closer to the universal God consciousness. Now, a metaphor, or not even a metaphor, but an actual reality that helped me put reincarnation into focus when I was very young is that my parents were rich. I grew up spoiled. I grew up in a $1 million condo on the ocean in Daytona. One of my best friends, his father died when he was 5 years old. He was poor. He lived with his mother and his grandmother. He didn't do very good in school. He ended up being a coke dealer, and ended up getting arrested. Now that could have easily been me, or maybe that will be me in the next lifetime because I had a silver spoon hanging out of my mouth. And I really allowed that to give me some perspective that I am blessed. We're all blessed. But, lady luck, I had a lot of things handed to me. I didn't have to pay for my college education. My parents bought me cars and stuff like that. I've had the luxury of having a lot of things conveniently handed to me in life. Now, granted, my parents, they're still rich, they're divorced, but they're both independently wealthy, and they don't give me anything anymore, which is fine. I don't want anything from them. They easily could, either one of them could make me a multimillionaire, and that is just completely not important to me whatsoever. But that gave me perspective growing up like that, especially when a lot of people don't always get the best deal in life. And most of the world does not even have running water or toilets or electricity. And we're spoiled as Americans. We don't even realize that most humans on this planet don't have a cell phone, don't have a car, live in third world countries and in third world conditions. And, so eventually I'm going to reincarnate and, be brought up in a third world country, and maybe starve to death, and that just gives me a lot of perspective. If you believe in reincarnation, it's not a Christian belief. It's actually
right.
Hindu and Buddhist belief. Before the Council of Nicaea and Constantine, created the Pseudepigrapha, which was the texts that were omitted from the Bible. Reincarnation and karma were both part of the belief system. And after the King James version of the Bible came out, those concepts are not in it anymore. And I think it's a travesty and a shame, because I think we should be teaching this in religion.
Okay, now we're going inside baseball. I'm going to get into the hierarchy because, now, full disclosure to you, although my listeners are tired of me hearing me talk about it, I have come to certain gifts late in my life. But one of my big connections is I learned to talk to my spirit guides, which you acknowledge you have spirit guides.
Sure.
When we have spirit guides, now where do they fall into this? Are they? My belief is that my spirit guides have my absolute best interest at heart. Is that correct?
I believe so, but we all have a soul circle with many, many angels that are there to help us, and then we all have a dark side to us also, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. If we focus more on the positive, if we focus more on the light, we focus more on love, we're going to receive more from that side of our soul circle. But, life is not perfect, and it's definitely not intended to be perfect. So when little things go wrong, or even big things go wrong, there's energy involved in that also. And sometimes, I don't like to use the word bad because it gives that side too much energy. So when less than good things happen in our life, I've learned that it is so overly important to thank God for all the things that don't go our way. And that's a hard discipline to play on yourself. But I've been doing it for probably 25, 30 years, and it helps me to work with the spirit guides that do have my better interest in mind. I had an old girlfriend, the girl that I was telling you about, where we both saw that star moving. Well, stars don't move. But when we saw that same thing, I texted her and she texted me back. We're both watching the same thing at the same time. She activated a crystal for me, which was a huge mistake on my behalf to allow somebody to do that for me. And so I have the crystal, and I'm praying and I'm meditating, holding it in my hand. And there's actually a scientific principle involved with crystals called the piezoelectric effect, which you can harness, or you can channel energy into and through the crystals and cause it to vibrate mechanically, and it creates all these supernatural effects. And so I was praying and meditating. I'm seeing angels pop up all in my house. And by the way, my house is built on an Indian reservation, and it's totally haunted, which I absolutely love. And anyway, I broke through, unlike I had broken through in a long time. I can always break through, but this particular night I broke through really, really well. I mean, I could see manifestations of angels in my home, more vivid than I had seen in some time. And then within a 24-hour period, I ripped my back, and my back was ripped for about 6 weeks. I'm a DJ karaoke entertainer here in Orlando, Florida, in and around the attractions areas, and I have to lift my sound system. I basically had to work with a ripped back for 6 weeks, and I can remember laying on the floor of my home crying, and I was crying not because of the pain. The pain was enough to make a grown man cry, but I was just crying because of the situation. And in the depths of my self-pity and sorrow and pain, I started to thank God for everything good in my life. And, it was just a huge revelation for me. And I could feel my guardian protector angels just crowding around me, nurturing me back to health. And it was a hard curve. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with in my life. But I'm glad that I had to go through it.
Okay, let me be more pointed with the question. Now, I understood your answer, but okay, in my particular case, I have a core group of 7. Now, I mean, I'm not saying there are other spirit guides. Even I acknowledge that I have some that come and go for whatever reasons. But these are the 7 that I work with most, communicate with most, count on for my day-to-day metaphysical needs. All of them have my best interest at heart, except for one who I think her job is to get me into trouble, but that's a whole other show. But let's start with now you kind of, first of all, let me clarify. As far as you're concerned, spirit guides and angels are the same lot.
Spirit guides and angels, actually, the word angel is actually a misinterpretation. In Yiddish, or in Hebrew, the word angel actually means messenger. Mm-hmm. In Greek, it's angelos. It means intermediary or middleman. So there's a misconception about what angels actually are. But are angels and my spirit guides the same thing? I don't think so. I mean,
okay.
If you research it, you have the hierarchy of angels.
Right. Well, okay. Well, because I also believe that I can access angels and okay. So we're on the same page here. Establishing that they have my best interest at heart. Now, and then you're talking about the angels, the hierarchy of angels. But now, are these angels and spirit guides that I'm working with, that I'm communicating with? I guess the most direct way to ask the question is: are they servants of Yahweh, or are they servants of Source, or could it be a combination of both? What's the story on that?
I think it depends on the individual. But what I feel from you, Wes, is that yours are not part of the Anunnaki pantheon. That they are spirit beings. That they are there to protect your better interest, also to guide you in certain directions, just like myself. Now, this is an interesting concept: is that not all the thoughts that we think are our own. Our guides can place thoughts in our mind that we think we are thinking ourselves, and that our own brain generated these thoughts. But sometimes they come from our guides.
Oh, I don't doubt that for a minute.
For example, when something told me to go outside and look up into the sky during the winter, you know what I'm saying? And, and the girl I was dating at the same time, the same thing happened to her. Was that a thought that my mind generated, or was that placed in my mind by a spirit guide or an angel, or maybe even an extraterrestrial? It's debatable. I can't be exactly sure. But whatever happened, that thought to make me go outside and look up in the sky, that did not come from my brain. It came from somewhere else.
Yeah, because I believe the only real difference in your typical psychic versus your layman is which voices they learn to listen to.
Yes.
So I don't have a problem with that. Now, where was I? I had a really, really, really good question. Making that leap that we have got. First of all, I was going to say that this brought me back to reincarnation. I believe that either everybody's on Earth either to learn something or to teach something. If you're not learning, then maybe you're the teacher, vice versa. But I do believe that I use the word destiny, but some people think, no, destiny is something that's locked in. I believe we're given a destiny, a goal, and then the choices we make in life, the voices that we choose to listen to over the years, either bring us closer to that higher destiny or move us away from it. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that because it's my show, I got to bring everything back to me one way or the other.
But I agree with you totally. Yeah, absolutely, Wes.
Now, so now I want to take it for the last segment here into the layman's paranormal realm, if you will. As a medium, you encounter what we would commonly call ghost, and you don't seem to have a big problem with that word, which is so refreshing from a psychic, incidentally.
Yeah, I love ghosts. I cohabitate with them in my home. My home is built on an old Indian reservation. My home serves as a vortex, and it's very common for earthbounders. In other words, somebody dies, but they're stuck in between dimensions. It's very common for them to find me and come to my house and ask me to help them cross over. And that's where I will employ the help of an archangel called Azrael. And Azrael helps you cross over, and more specifically, helps you find loved ones on the other side that can help you cross over. So it's me working with Azrael, who works with, perhaps your parents or somebody that was close to you that passed, who's on the other side, who's there to help you. Because once you die, at first you're kind of lost. You don't exactly understand what's happening to you. Right after the shooting in Orlando, and I lived 7.3 miles away from that whole thing, I was supposed to do a show the next day, and I didn't even know what happened until the next morning. And I have a show that I'm going to do, and I called the host of the show and I said, well, what? It's your show. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but what direction do you want to go with the show? And he said, well, we were going to talk about spirits and the spirit world. And he said, well, how about let's talk about what happens to people's souls and spirits after they get killed in such a traumatic fashion. And so we did a whole show based on that. And I was telling him, I said, not always, but often when you get killed, in a tragic kind of fashion like that, that you don't immediately go to the other side. You kind of get stuck in limbo. It's very common. And, like I said, a number of souls will find me and ask me to help them and escort them over to the other side. And I'm happy to do it. And I know that's part of my mission, to help earthbounders cross over to the other side.
We should go bowling together.
Let's do it.
Now, a question that was given to me on Twitter just recently that actually is very germane to this conversation is, after the great tragedy in Florida, a woman contacted me knowing what I'm into, and she said, do you know if anybody's planning on going down there to help these spirits cross? Now, what I told her was, I said, first of all, there's no need for anybody to get in a rush, because now my thesis is, now you tell me if it fits into your theology of what prayer is capable of. I said, first of all, they've got an entire nation praying for their peace. That's going to give a lot of the lost souls, the stuck souls, however you want to term their state of being, the ability, the guidance, whatever. In other words, that just the layman's mass prayer is also a very effective tool for doing that. I'll say it. Does Yahweh bogart all the prayers in your opinion, or does prayer still have that kind of power?
Also prayer is also based on your intention. If you have the most just and noble intention within your prayers, then you can supersede these, extraterrestrial alien creator gods. You can. We were talking earlier, most psychics and very spiritual people, they believe in more of a concept of one. And there's so much power contained in the concept of one. There's less power contained in isolated religions that conflicted with each other and don't agree on just basic premises of the religion. So it's a good question. It's hard to answer. But here's something interesting. The religion that is losing the most followers at the highest clip right now is Christianity. The religion that is gaining the most followers at the highest clip is Islam. And I believe that was a big part of why Pope Francis came to the United States last year. He's trying to get people back into the Catholic Church. I do understand why. But it's interesting that Pope John Paul II wanted to baptize gray aliens. And that's a whole other show. It's a whole other story. But I was at a UFO conference, and one of the most famous abductees in world history, her name is Linda Corteil. She got abducted. It's called the Brooklyn Bridge incident. And the reason is because her condo was really close to the Brooklyn Bridge. And when this ship came up to her condo, it was visible by hundreds and hundreds of people. And the EMP pulse from this spacecraft rendered the engines of the vehicles basically useless. So all these people were stopped on the Brooklyn Bridge and couldn't help but just get out of their car and look up and see a UFO. And the second it took off, their car started up again. And Pope John Paul II found out about all this and invited her to move to Vatican City. And that whole story is a trip. And she, in her presentation at this conference, talked about how Pope John Paul II wanted to baptize the gray aliens. And that just absolutely blew my mind.
I can understand why that would blow your mind.
Yeah,
there's just so many directions to go on this whole topic. The last thing I want to take you off on another tangent here.
Sure.
Actually, coming full circle. The thesis, Yahweh is an alien. But now here's the next question, though. And by alien, I guess that would just be the definition of not of this earth, a physical being not of this earth. The question is, once an alien becomes, powerful enough doesn't sound right, but accesses that metaphysical plane to the degree that we're talking about, to be able to gain energy from prayer, for example. Does the word alien still do them justice at that point?
Yes, they are extraterrestrials, but they are a whole lot more than that. I mean, the ability to see life on a planet and set up religion so that we pray to them. There's definitely a lot of supernatural qualities in that. They understand that there's so much power in the spoken word, and also, when we go to church, we sing. There's so much power in it. Now, and also, all of these points around the world in ancient antiquity were basically built out of stone on geodetic markers that also mirrored star constellations from which they came, most of which are Orion and the Pleiades. And we can find evidence of this in archaeological sites on every continent on our planet. It's very interesting.
Well, John, that's pretty much the time we have allotted for this segment. And like I said, there's a lot further we can go. I didn't even get into your notes. I was just, that was my stuff. So the points that you pointed out. So I'm going, but I do have the copy of your book now, and I'm going to try to get into it. And I would like to invite you to come back on the show in the future after I've actually done my homework.
You know what? I embrace the opportunity. Wes, you're a brilliant host. You had some very, very good questions. Some of them I don't know if I answered them as well as I would have liked to. And the reason that you just came up with some incredibly tough questions that do require some answers that I don't know if any human can really give those answers, because we just don't know everything.
Well, as a person, basically, when I deal with religion, when I deal with the spiritual world, when I deal with life, I just think that it all ought to make sense. In other words, everything fits together. And so I have this little, what I call my box, and anything you give me, I have to find a spot for it in my box. And it either has to fit or it doesn't. So that's kind of how I guide my questions, is I try to bring the conversation, once again, always back to me, but it's because I want everything to fit in my neat little box at the end of the day so I can be an enlightened individual.
You're a great host, Wes, and I'd love to be on your show again in the future. So, anyway,
I've got
care.
your book, and everybody, now to give John some plugs here, johnpolkmedia.com. You can also go to alienoraclescrolls.com. That's a couple websites. Anything else you want to plug before I let you go, John?
At Reverend Polk on Twitter. At Reverend Polk on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I'll follow you back. And if you want to just email me, I don't have a problem giving out my email, which is on alienoraclescrolls.com. That's a way to contact me, but it's jpolk2, the number 2, at CFL, like Central Florida, .rr, like Roadrunner.com. Once again, jpolk2 at CFL.rr.com.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Stay with me after the top of the hour. We're going right into hour 2 with the Haunted Librarian. Thanks again, John.
Paranormal Filler.